Hello, I'm Ben Leonard, and I'm going to explain a little bit about my trip to Niger during Christmas of 2010. I gave this presentation initially at the International Center at Purdue University on April 22nd, 2011, and now I'm just recording it so that I can um, let you know about it. My brother Thomas was a Peace Corps volunteer in Niger for approximately a year and a half. He's back now, and I had talked with him a couple of times, seen some pictures of him while he was over there, and I wanted to see what life was like there. I wanted to experience Niger for a little bit, so I decided to go during Christmas. I spent about 8 days there. And all in all, I'd have to say this is like your $1 million or $1 billion trip. It would be practically impossible for the average person to take something like this because I didn't need to learn the local languages, such as Hausa or Zarma or Fulani, because my brother was, or French, because my brother was there. See remote areas that well, I guess you can take a bus to some of them, but it's very hard to get back to these regions. There's no hotels. There's nothing. There's not even electricity. Got to travel at the coolest time of the year because Niger is a very hot country. So this was probably the optimal time to travel. And also, it was a short enough stay so that I got sick after I came back as opposed to when I went over there. I got a very bad cold, but luckily I was done with or I got over that eventually, and it didn't really affect me until I got back. I could start feeling that I was coming down with the cold while I was over there. So to tell you a little bit about my thoughts on the matter, it was really impossible to fully understand a different culture, I think, ever, but especially when you're traveling just a short period of time. Uh, so I kind of had some preconceived ideas and some ways of looking at the world. And when I was able to look at Niger through those lenses, I was able to get a better idea for some things because I'm stepping outside of my own culture and looking at an entirely different one. So some of these are for nutrition, Weston A. Price. If you Google the Weston A. Price Foundation, you will see more about this. Posture Esther Gokle. She has a lot of information on having a healthy posture. And she looks at different, less industrialized cultures to get an idea for what the proper way of movement is. Cultures which have much less instances of back pain, etc. Also, Austrian School Economics gives sort of a school of economics that doesn't see the government as the solution to every problem. In fact, it's pretty anti-government. And different cultural experiences, international people that I've met here, well, at Purdue or at any number of places. So if you become offended by something I say, well, I'm not trying to offend anyone, but if you have to riot, please sit through the rest of the presentation first. So first of all, the country of Niger. It is right here. I've circled it. It's an entirely landlocked country in West Africa, one of the poorest countries in the world. My brother was in the province of Dosso, which is right here. The capital city of Niamey over in this region. So we ended up traveling out to Lido, which is in the Dosso province. We traveled down this main highway over here to get there. Niamey is the capital city. It's, I think, the only real airport in there. That's where I flew in. That's where the Peace Corps' main station is. My brother was stationed in a city called Lido. And I also visited Gubawa, which was a Christian village in Niger. So to give you a kind of overview of Niger, the total fertility rate is 7.4 lifetime births per mother. That's the average woman has seven births, and women get married very young there, so it's common for them to get fistula, or it's a serious complication within for pregnancies. So you have to realize there's a serious attrition rate in terms of, or significant at least, attrition rate in terms of women who give a couple of births not being able to have any more children. 1 in 7 women die from childbirth related issues. 1% of births result in the mothers dying. So that gives you an idea. In the U.S., we think of childbirth as an exciting occasion. The thought that the mother could die doesn't really pass our minds at all. But this is a relative historical anomaly throughout most of history. Childbirth has been a very dangerous activity. I guess dating back to Eve, when God said that she was going to have pain in giving childbirth. So, anyways, life expectancy 51 years old for males, 54 for females. Infant mortality rate is 75.7 per 1,000. So that is roughly 8%, which is very high. And when you look at this graph I found up here on Google Graphs, it used to be 150 until about 1990, and then it's been decreasing since then. But 15% of children dying during pregnancy is pretty bad. We talked to, my brother asked one person about this, and he said he had 6 of his 7 children die. And he had ended up being able to adopt a couple of children from a family member who had died. But, I mean, it's hard to imagine someone experiencing 6 of their children die. But that is life in Niger. This is the place where my brother lived. It was built into the, kind of enters into the wall of, or into a concession of his host family. It's built by the Peace Corps, so it's much more luxurious than the average Nigerian has. But if we look around it, this is the courtyard. Over here is the bathroom. The bathroom is a hole, and you can squat down here if you need to. If you want to take a shower, that's mainly when you sit there. And you have a little bottle which you can splash water for cleaning yourself off after using the restroom, or for pouring water over yourself for a shower. This reed mat over here covers a little sleeping area. So there's a reed, sort of a stick bed here. My brother slept out here most of the year, except during the cold season. You always use mosquito netting because malaria is a big problem, at least if you're sleeping outdoors. In this region it's drier and there's not as much of a problem with mosquitoes, but in Niamey, the capital city, there were tons of mosquitoes. This is a little ceramic or maybe metal water bucket. It keeps the water cool. This is inside Thomas's apartment or house. He has 2 back rooms over here, which didn't really have any windows or lighting there. Pretty much pitch black. If you wanted to do anything back there, you had to use a flashlight or whatever. So he did his cooking over here. Most Nigerians cooked over a fire, but he had a stove. Also, most Nigerians didn't have a bathroom like this. Most of them went to the bathroom in a dry stream bed that ran through town. So here are some pictures of the concession where Thomas was living. Well, I guess first off, a concession is a area that's walled in, and it has all of the members of sort of an extended family living in there. There will be usually the grandfather, and then all of his sons will live there. And this is, the grandfather's house, and the other families, it's kind of in the center. Other families live in buildings sort of built onto the walls around the outside. This is a more prosperous area, I guess. So they have mud walls, but it's very typical that those would be made out of sticks. Uh, they're inside a hut cooking here. They do this when it's windy and outside, or if it's not windy, then they'll cook out here. Of course, all the cooking is done over an open fire. And here's some children. There's small children running around everywhere, especially in the concession. Here's a picture. There's me. This is the mayor of the town. He actually lives in a different town right now since he's a school teacher and he got elected recently. This is the patriarch of the family. And here are a number of other children and people from the concession. Also, they kept the animals living in this central region. They were given to I think some Fulani tribesmen to take care of and take out to herd during the day, but during the night they would stay here in the center, and they're tied up to these different posts right here. I had alluded to a little bit of this earlier, but health is a significant problem in Niger. Some of the problems that they have are malnutrition. This is one of the reasons for children dying. We went to a clinic that they had in the town, and what they have the mothers do is bring their children in. I'm not sure on what basis, like every couple of weeks, these infants, maybe it's more frequently, and they'll weigh them, and they have a growth chart, and if the baby starts dropping below this trend line that they generally are supposed to follow, they know that it's experiencing malnutrition, and so they'll give the mother this sugar nutrient type mix, and then they'll mix it with water, and they can give it to the I think the baby, and it will usually keep it nourished enough to survive. Malaria is a problem. Most people don't have mosquito nets, and they certainly don't have malaria medication, which I took and my brother took. Even if they were able to afford this malaria medication, I understand it's not something that is really you're supposed to take for extended periods of time. Childbirth, I mentioned earlier, it's a cause of problems. Intestinal parasites. My brother said that Niger is known as the shittiest post in the Peace Corps because of the number of incidents that they have of diarrhea and other stomach problems. My brother had a lot of problems with this. Luckily I didn't, but it's probably because I was very careful while I was over there. And also I drink a lot of kefir and kombucha, so I think my stomach has a lot of healthy bacteria in there that were able to prevent me from getting something while I was there. Also the harsh weather. It's a very difficult climate, very hot, very dry. Even during the rainy season, I believe it's fairly dry. It's not so much that you get tons of rain, but you get tons of storms which have some rain. You get a lot of dust storms as well. And when you look at their teeth, the children have good teeth, but when you look at the older people, a lot of them are missing teeth and have problems. Although given that would be the case if here in America if we didn't have dentists, but they don't really have dentists there. But you'll probably be able to find these problems listed elsewhere, but they don't give a full story. First off, is they have very high quality food. It is a much less limited variety of food, but everything that all the food you get is much more organic than anything you could find in the grocery store here. And when you look at their faces and their bodies and everything, they have their faces they have very beautiful faces. I mean, it's a different general facial structure than sort of Europeans have, so it's a lot different from what I'm used to. But when I got back, arrived in the airport in New York, I was surprised at, I guess you'd say, how everyone looked, because I was used to seeing the much more symmetric, well-formed faces in Niger. Also, the guys you see there, generally pretty covered up, but you see them in a tank top. You see they're pretty muscular people. Also, the people are very happy, far happier than people here in the United States. There's laughing all the time. I'll cover this a little bit later in the presentation, but they also have good posture, and they walk around. They're not sitting in a chair all day, so they get pretty good exercise. Okay, so with all these health problems, what are the solutions? What medicine can they get? First off is aid clinics. Some are run by NGOs, some by the government, some by Christian organizations. This actually causes a little bit of a problem because the government and NGO organizations have very deep pockets, so they give everything away for free. However, the Christian organizations generally have to charge for something because they're running on a much tighter budget, so people can get kind of angry, I guess my brother's saying, when the Christian hospitals will say charge for something. But then on the other hand, as you know, with the price being zero, the demand is unlimited. So oftentimes with the government or NGO, hospitals are out of supplies, and then, I mean, until the bureaucrats order more, there's nothing left. Whereas the more Christian hospitals will usually always have supplies. There's also salesmen at the town markets that sell the traditional medicines. Here you see one guy's on the microphone and all the children are gathered around, and apparently he at this point in time he was advertising some medicines that were very good for white people. Maybe he spotted some potential customers in the region while we were taking pictures. But he was advertising for white people. And again, here you see these crowds of children. These children are everywhere. Finally, there's sort of exorcisms. We saw a couple of these taking place. One was at a wedding where they built a little hut, and the bride, or I guess it would be the bride-to-be was supposed to stay in there during the week, and then they did these different dances outside at the night. We also went and saw a healing ceremony. They didn't want us to take pictures there, but they were fine with us taking a picture of these musicians playing outside. And there was actually a person that had come all the way from Niamey, which is a full-day journey, to try to get healed, because none of the regular doctors could do, or conventional doctors could do anything for him. But this exorcism was, I think, maybe took place on a weekly or bi-weekly basis in a village near Lido. So here's some experiences with food I had in Thomas's concession. They grow a lot of millet, sorghum, and peanuts in the area, also sugarcane. So here, tuo, it's one of the most common dishes here. It's millet powder. You see people pounding up the millet all the time. Generally, the women do it, but if the children aren't in school, then it's definitely the children doing the pounding millet. And even if there's no millet to pound, you can often see little girls with the millet, with pestles and mortars, just pounding as a play. I had read some sort of the primal fitness type things or unschooling literature, and they say that children tend to, in traditional societies, learn by playing, which in a way to mimic the adults. And here that was definitely the case, because the children would play with pounding the millet, and that was a game for them. So in this case, you see this dish 2-0 is you have the millet powder in the water, and you cook it over this there's a fire here, and you stir it, and then it becomes very thick. Here's a woman washing the millet. Of course, since we're taking a picture, all the children are gathering around here. Here's some peanuts that a woman is looking through, and then they're making a squash sauce. They cook the squash in boiling squash in some water. Okay, some fancy food. These are a couple more exotic things that I tried. First off, in the upper left corner here, we've got some millet cakes. I saw these millet cakes while and actually we bought them. We got them at the market. They're part of street food. There will be people selling food everywhere. At the markets, it's swarming with little children carrying these trays on their head with food, and you stop them. You can give them some money and buy the food. But as Americans with modern stomachs, we cannot handle this so we have to eat it fresh right off the stove while it's hot. Otherwise, the flies get on it and it becomes quite dangerous. Along with this, my brother had noticed that he thought that people didn't know that much about adding and subtracting and everything like that, because saying that some of this food was sold at less than the cost of the materials needed to make it. But either the people making it and selling it didn't care, or they weren't really adding up the costs. But they were out there selling it and having a good time at the markets, nevertheless. Here we went to a bar owned by some Lebanese Christians in Niamey with some other Peace Corps people. So they have a little table here. Had some of the Nigerian beer, and I came at Christmas time, so you see they had a Christmas tree on top of the bar. We're here out on the open roof. We also had a meal with the village chief. Here's my brother Thomas. Here's the village chief. Here's his son, and here's the village chief's driver. This was a very nice meal. We had some chicken. We also had a dish with beef in it. Meat is very expensive here, so this was quite a luxury. Here is my brother cooking a meal at the PC hostel in Doso. The PC hostels were buildings owned by the Peace Corps, where in sort of the major cities where if Peace Corps volunteers had to come in to these cities for something, then they could stay here. And they had much more modern appliances. They had security and everything like that. So, yeah. This is not anything you would see in probably anywhere outside of a PC hostel or other Western place in Niger. In America, we're a pretty uniform group. I guess you could say we have different ethnic groups in terms of the Latinos, blacks, and whites. But it's nothing to the extent of what they have in Niger. There's numerous ethnic groups, and each of these groups has their own language, and there are certainly ethnic tensions here. First, to begin with, this is a Tuareg family that lived in Lido, the town Thomas was living in. The mother was a white Tuareg, and the father was I believe, a Hausa. The Tuareg, that's what I think there's a vehicle out right now that you can buy called the Touareg. I think the Touareg may be the English pronunciation of this place, and the Tuareg is the French pronunciation. So I'm not sure exactly, but they called these people the Tuareg in Niger. And the Tuareg are your stereotypical desert group. They're the main tribe that would take people across the desert. Very fierce warriors. They have a lot of camels. This is a black Tuareg. This is the same tribe, but apparently the Tuareg were originally maybe Arab, some other group that I think came from the Middle East into Africa. So they have much lighter skin, and slavery has always been a big part of African history. So they would take slaves from the surrounding area, which would be the more indigenous African cultures, and so those people were all black. But because I guess for whatever reason, probably racism is a large part of it. The white Tuareg and black Tuareg didn't really intermarry very much. So they're the same tribe, same language, everything, but different skin colors. You got the tan, lighter skin, and then the darker skin Tuareg. Here's some Fulani women. They have kind of a distinctive way of dressing that you can see here. There are also the Tuareg were nomadic, so are the Fulani. But the Tuareg are kind of high on the social scale, I think probably since they're pretty rich and they are strong enough not to have to sort of take crap from anyone, but the Fulani are on the exact opposite. They're the bottom of the social scale. In Nigeria, which is right next door, actually the ethnic group is called Hausa Fulani because the Fulani conquered the region and were the rulers and intermarried in with the Hausa. Here, I don't know their exact group, but the Hausa are herders, and because farmers and herders never get along because the cattle like to graze on crops, they're at the bottom of the social scale, and people don't like them very much. But they're generally out in the wilderness. My brother had said he had seen some people, and they were, and I guess all the Fulani are very thin. But yeah. Also, then here is the Hausa family. Hausa is the main ethnic group in this region, and also the primary ethnic group in Nigeria. It's also a different. I guess it's more of a language group as opposed to an ethnic group. They have a number of different tribes. I think within the Hausa language group, and they're usually denoted by this. They use the scarring features on their cheeks and heads to designate what tribe they're in. But I guess that has been outlawed, so they don't do it as much anymore. It's probably done more in these rural regions. And there's also the Zarma, which I don't have pictures of here. These were more in Niamey, the capital, and northwest of that. Well, we're east of the territory, east of the capital, just into the Hausa region. To me, I didn't really notice much of a difference between the Hausa and the Zarma. I guess the Hausa tend to be more traders, and the Zarma are kind of more warriors. Is there historical characteristics anyways, but they both dress pretty similar, and I couldn't notice a difference. My brother said that he could tell, I think, the difference in terms of the facial shape of them. Here we've got some moving on to the next topic of transportation. First we'll cover some gas-powered transportation. One thing that's kind of odd is, for me at least, was taking the way they filled the gas tanks. I'm used to having a gas station where you put the pump in. Here they had a funnel, and then they would pour the gasoline into the tank through the funnel. And the first time I saw a gas station, I thought it was a liquor store because they had all these bottles which were filled with this sort of brownish liquid, and they were maybe, I don't know, about the size of a bottle of whiskey. And so I said to my brother, it's kind of odd that they've got all of these this whiskey sitting out here, because I don't think very many people here could afford to buy such a big quantity of whiskey, and also this is a mostly Muslim country, so I think they frown upon alcohol. He said, "Oh no, that's gasoline, and this is a fill-up place." So they've got these roadside stands where they'll have a table with bottles of gasoline on it, and then also they'll have at a market they might have a portable gas station such as this. These yellow containers are all peanut oil containers brought into Nigeria, and when they had used the peanut oil in them, they fill them up with gasoline and they take them into Niger. I guess this is technically illegal, but there's not any government-sanctioned gas stations in this region, so they use this. So you'd see mostly motorcycles, but here in this case it's a car which drove into this market completely filled with these tanks of gasoline. Here's a bus. This is my first trip in Niger, and outside of being in taxis. And this is quite crowded. You see they've got two rows of seats here, and then one row on the side, and then there's an aisle in the center. So I got in, and I was like, okay, this bus is pretty tight. It's a little bit claustrophobic. And then after I was thinking this, they lowered down a seat, or folded out a seat into all of the aisleways, and then filled those in. So we were pretty jam-packed, and I was thought, well, this is quite a ride, something to talk about when I'm home. But it was only the beginning of the ride. This was actually luxury, as my brother pointed out to me earlier. Everyone riding on this bus was very rich. And by the way, this bus took us the first half of the way to Lido from the capital city of Niger. But on the way back, we rode in this full-sized van. It's your typical full-sized van, only very dilapidated. We had 27 people. It may have been more. And 3 guinea fowl. One of the guinea fowl took a peck at my feet during the trip. They had tied the legs together of them and put them under the seat of the van. But I could not shift my weight from one sort of butt cheek to the other, and I don't know if I could have made it if the driver hadn't had to go to the bathroom with about an hour left of, I think it was about maybe a 5-hour drive. And so I got out and was able to stretch my legs while I used the restroom. There were some women and children and men in there and babies who were in there when I got into the van, and they had probably been in the van for an hour or so, and they didn't get out when I got out, and then they so they were sitting really motionless for about 6 hours, I think. And I just don't know how they did that. And since some of them were women with a baby sitting on their lap, now a baby is not a superhuman feat of strength to carry, but to have something that heavy sitting on your lap for hours on end is, these people are tough. Finally here, on the last note on this slide, you can see this is maybe a typical road in Niger. It wasn't there wasn't as heavy traffic as I thought, but there were some odd things. The military had taken over the government recently because the president had refused to step down at the end of his term. So you see they had started enforcing the law that said you had to wear a helmet when you were on a motorcycle. So you saw these people in this riding on the motorcycle, and they'd have a helmet, and they'd be wearing flip-flops and long flowing robes. You'd also see people biking down the street, maybe someone pushing a cart, whatever. So yeah, it's a little bit different. So some more gasoline-powered transportation. Here we've got a bush taxi which is loading up. As you see, they've packed as absolute many people onto this as they can. This is leaving after a market, and luckily I didn't have to ride in one of these, because I guess this is even more uncomfortable than riding in that 27 plus person van, because you're out. This can't travel as fast as these pickup trucks, and also you're exposed to all of the wind and dust. It's always dusty there. My nose is always feeling really torn up because of all of the dust in the air. So you're out in the elements driving for however long this is. And my brother said this was much worse to do than driving in the van. But any time you were in a vehicle which would stop, all these children would run up and be selling yogurt drinks or snacks or millet cakes to you. So you had these, I thought maybe you could compare them to human-powered mobile vending machines. Then, of course, you'd seen the picture on the last slide of a car completely filled with gasoline, but it's more common to see these motorcycles piled high with gas tanks and traveling around. So they would. This was how the gasoline was distributed. They come out of Nigeria and take this gasoline up traveling on these bumpy roads on these tiny powered bikes. And we saw one guy that was missing a leg, and my brother speculated that he lost it in a motorcycle accident. But so in the U.S., we just have gasoline-powered transportation. But in Niger, there's also what you could call grass-powered transportation. I had a chance to experience some of this when I was over there, so we took a donkey ride. This is normally done by children. So these two boys rode us over to Gubawa, which is a Christian town. And here you can see one of them showing off by or standing on his horse while he's riding, and he had also done some riding backward earlier. So the donkeys are one way. Here's also me on a donkey down here. You've got an ox cart over here, and also we rode a camel. This was by some Tuareg, and it was by far the most, I think at least the most expensive trip we took. But it was a lot of fun. The first half of the ride was pretty uncomfortable when they were leading the camels, because the camels were then bending down, and so the whole camel is kind of tilted forward, and so the saddle here wants to slide up, and you are then are sitting on the front of the saddle, so it's not too comfortable. But then eventually they let us take the reins, and the camels would stand more upright, and it was actually a very nice ride after that point. So now we'll move into some of the sightseeing trips that we took. One was to see the giraffes. There are actually giraffes in West Africa. They're endangered species, and these are the only ones left in West Africa. They're trying to plant trees and things like that to keep them safe. The guide said that the people in the area would originally hunt them with bows and arrows, and they would use poison-tipped arrows and then, I guess, follow them until the giraffes died. But the giraffes need the trees, I think, since they've got kind of long necks to bend over and eat off the ground. You can tell the difference because the male has 3 horns on his head, whereas the female only has 2. And one thing that I was really surprised at when I saw these giraffes was the sort of height to length ratio. So these giraffes were very high compared to their length, and their neck, the base of their neck, took up pretty much half of their back. So this is very interesting. Here we are driving out to see the giraffes, and this was kind of an interesting, or you could say a cultural experience. So we drove up to the park headquarters, and then you have to pay to get in, and then you pay for a guide, and the guide goes in your car, and then they don't really know where the giraffes are. They're kind of in some extended region, so he takes us off, and then we're driving down this road, and we're actually in this taxi here, and the taxi driver of our car, since I'm in the car following behind this one, had I think only been driving for about a month. So at certain points in the ride, we were afraid for our lives. We'd be going around gentle curves in the highway, and he would start drifting onto the other lane. I'm not sure if this was due to inexperience or due to the car being not working very well. Anyways, luckily there was not very much oncoming traffic. Also, when we got off of this dirt road right here, we went onto a sand path, and from what I understand, or from riding in the car, driving on sand is a lot like driving on snow. So when you have a driver who's driving on snow and barely knows how to drive and cannot quite get the hang of driving on snow, you kind of become start fearing for your life a little bit. But so, anyways, when we got to the region where the drafts were, the tour guide sort of hops up on the windowsill of the car here and starts looking around. So all the people, other Peace Corps drivers in that car, started getting out and looking around as well. We took a ride on I think it's called the Niger River or the Niamey River. It goes right by the city of Niamey, which is the capital. And also it's kind of a strange river in a way, because in most big major cities, when you have a river right by it, by this point in history, the river runs through the city because it's grown and everything like that. But here, I mean, Niamey is growing, but when you get to the other side of the river, there's really not anything there. The whole town is on one side of the river. But we got a boat ride, and here's our driver and his son, and this is the boat we were in. So we went out to see the hippos. We saw a number of hippos. We didn't see very much of them. They just peeked their eyes and their nose above the surface. Occasionally you can see them further out of the water, but we didn't get the chance to do that. But it was a very pleasant experience going down the river like that. Peaceful, cool. You saw all the people bathing and washing their clothes in the river because it was near the evening. And okay, I guess as I mentioned earlier, on one side of the river there's nothing. Yeah, this is one side of the river. On the other side of the river there's houses and buildings and tons of different things like that. So I'd read about posture through a book called 8 Steps to a Pain-Free Back by Esther Goclay. If you look on my website, funinniger.com, you'll see some posts giving more details like this, but she had given some characteristics of good posture, and it's a lot of these require extreme flexibility, at least compared to what is predominant within Western civilization. Now, the posture I saw here was not as good as I saw in her book, because she had taken pictures in, I think, Benin, which is very close to here. But I saw the same general things. For instance, here, you see people deep squatting. And they just squat down on their knees. If they have a chair available, they'll sit in the chair. That's much preferred. So whenever we were visiting, since we were guests and they were trying to be very friendly to us, they'd always give us a chair. Or if there wasn't a chair, then within a few minutes, some children would come running up with a chair. But for the average person, if they're in a place with no seat, they'll just squat down like this, and they can stay like this for extended periods of time. We asked someone about it, and they said, well, we can only sit like this for about a half hour, because if you sit like this for longer than that, then your legs will start to hurt. So to be able to sit like this is quite difficult. Give it a shot. But then to be able to sit like this for, say, 2 or 3 minutes is extremely difficult, much less to say you're going to sit like that for a half hour or more. But my brother said that he thought the person was incorrect because he had seen people sitting like this for far longer than a half hour. He thought maybe that you didn't have to get up after a half hour, but you had to just shift your weight around or something to loosen up. Another thing is sitting flat on the ground. So people will just sit with their legs stretched out flat on the ground. And they'll do this if they have a mat or something that they're sitting on. If it's just the dust, then they'll do this deep squat. But in the 8 Steps to a Pain-Free Back, the people would be sitting like this, and they'd have the straight leg, completely straight back and straight legs. I did see some women sitting with straight and crossed legs in front of them. I mean, straight. The legs were straight out in front, but crossed over each other. But their backs weren't straight. But yeah, they'll sit like this, and it's perfectly comfortable for them. Then also they do hip hinging. So when you bend over and you don't squat down, you've got a giant arch in your back here. They just bend over and their backs are perfectly straight. Now the bending comes at the hips. So this is very difficult to do, and they'll do this with their legs pretty much right together without their legs spread apart. Finally, I don't have any pictures of it, although I did remember seeing a couple things where I should have taken a picture. But their natural shoulder position is further back than us. We all have hunched over shoulders from working at a computer, etc. So they will often kind of stand with their arms crossed behind their back. This is not just their hands sitting on top of one another, but it would be their hands are kind of grasping the opposite upper arm, and so it's just kind of resting in the small of their back. Or they'd be standing with their arms just sort of hanging straight to the side. Sometimes they would cross their arms over in front as well. Most of the libertarians, of which I am one, despise the police state. So when you talk to an American about this, they say, well, who would keep everyone from stealing things if there wasn't a policeman on every corner, or a TSA agent with his hands down every set of pants, etc. But in Niger, there was not a police force. I mean, I'm sure the government would have loved to put in the most oppressive police force you can imagine, but they were kind of lacking in funds, so they had other things they wanted to spend it on other than harassing their citizenry. So, traditionally at least, there was one sort of official of the town, and he was the village chief. He would be elected democratically, but once he was elected, he would serve for life. This is the current village chief. He's pretty young to be a village chief. And I guess the old village chief had died recently. There's no police force, really. I guess, well, there were a couple of national government police officers in the town, but they pretty much just sat at their table drinking tea, and they didn't really do anything. Their house that they lived in was outside of town. But so you ask, well, what happens if there's a problem? Well, the people handle it themselves. The village chief is the judge. He will hear the case. And right now, if there's decide that he's guilty or something, then they will call in the two police officers and have them take the person up to Lido, I guess. Or not Lido, to Dosso, the capital of Dosso province, where they have a jail. So I don't know the intricate workings of this, but it all gets handled without police. Given there is some crime, I guess if you drive out, you shouldn't drive out through the bush at night because you could get robbed. But there seemed to be a little fear of crime. No one was afraid of getting mugged in the streets. You're probably safer on the streets of Lido than you are on the streets of New York or Chicago or Philadelphia. In the capital city of Niamey, there were armed guards everywhere. And it was a little bit like an adult's Halloween party, you would say, because these soldiers all looked like they were sort of playing soldier, because they were all wearing usually these camouflage clothes with flip-flop sandals, carrying a rifle. But the thing is, everyone would have their own sort of unique brand of camouflage or whatever. And so, also, I guess at the different places that were being guarded, they would have usually 5 or 6 people, and they'd just be sitting around a little fire because it's the cold season, of course, at the gate to the place, and chatting. And usually there would be people from several different agencies. Then for taxes, they have taxes, but when we were there, I guess there was a little discussion going on because it turned out that Thomas's concession hadn't paid taxes for several years, and so the people came in and they were discussing how much they should pay or whatever. It was it wasn't anyone from the national government or whatever, but it seemed like a pretty low key event. So as you can see, their IRS is not quite as strong. And in village life, really the national government has no effect on life. They go and live their lives pretty much as if the government didn't exist. Um, the country of Niger is, I think, I've seen estimates between 80 and 98% Muslim. There's one town just a donkey ride away, which was about 98% Christian. So we went and visited it, and they had three churches. We talked with some people from this church. It was one. Well, there's three denominations in Niger. There's the Evangelical Church, the Evangelical Protestant Church, and the Roman Catholic Church. So this church had 450 members, standing room only outside during most services. And then there's Evangelical Church and the Roman Catholic Church. During it had fallen over a little bit during the rainy season, so here you can see they're making more bricks so they can fix up the building. This happens fairly commonly. And you see it's got the metal structure. Here's the church bell, and here's the for the Catholic Church, and here's the pulpit for the Evangelical Protestant Church. Here's some of the statistics I mentioned on the previous slide. We saw a Bible in Hausa, so I guess quite a few people in this town were able to read compared to most towns because they wanted to read the Bible, which is in Hausa. When I was talking with them, I got the impression that literacy in that town was very high, at least in Hausa. But some things later made me question that, but so I'm not exactly sure. This is inside of the Evangelical Protestant Church, which had 450 members. When we rode to Gubawa on donkeys, then we got a ride back on camels from some Tuareg which were in the region. Here's the two camels. Here's first the Tuareg showing up on their camels. Here's my brother Thomas getting on the camel, and here's him riding the camel. Here everyone's crowded around because this is a major event. With this riding the camel, it turned out you can see how hospitality can have its downsides, because they wanted to, I think, charge us $20 to ride the camels, and whatever that is in the native currency, but it works out to be about $20. And this is just not unheard of amount of money in this region. I mean, one person can live for a week for maybe a couple dollars in this region. So this is a massive amount of money, and my brother didn't even think that they might charge this much. So he said, well, no, we're going to have to bargain. We can't, this is completely unacceptable price. And he starts to bargain, and my brother is a good bargainer. In general, when he bargains, he can get the price down at least 50%. Or to 50% of the original. So then the thing was, the people in the church, they really wanted us to ride this camel, and so they, when we were talking with them, then you could see that the Tuareg realized this, and so they said, well, these people are going to pay whatever we charge them. They just need the camel ride. And so my brother bargained for a while, and then eventually I was saying, look, we have our pride. We're not going to get gypped for a here. Let's just tell them to go away. And my eventually then the church said, well, we will give you some. We will pay for your camel ride. We said, no, you don't need to do this. We have enough money. I mean, not here, but at home, and we can cover it if we really need to. But then they said, well, we'll go outside. And so the church people bargained, and we didn't get 1 cent taken off the fare of the ride, which goes to show you that these Christians were very insistent on their being hospitable. So, but since then they had offered to pay, we couldn't convince them to let us pay the whole ride anyway, so we ended up splitting it. So we paid $10 and they paid $10. Alright, so I'm going to go into kind of nearing the end of the presentation, if you can have your patience here. So one thing you'll notice if you go to Niger is that Nigerians are very happy. I heard more laughing. And this week in Niger, and during the few days I spent out in Lido than I had during the entire previous year in back in America, and probably maybe the previous 2 years combined. So why is this the case? I'd say one case is that they're self-employed. They don't have a boss. They set their own working hours. They set their own working conditions. You know, they have a short commute. They walk 20 feet to their little workshop, or they walk out to the fields with their family. If some friend comes and asks them for some help, they can just drop what they're doing and go off. And if they don't get as much work done that day, okay, there's no deadlines that have to be met. And so they're self-employed. They don't have a boss or anything. Another thing is, and also they're not quite worried about bankruptcy as such. Everything's more of a go-on-the-flow basis. So another thing I think is a major effect is they all live with their children and grandchildren. As I mentioned earlier, you've got the concession where you've got the father, and then you've got his and mother, and you got all their sons living there with their families. The daughters go live in their husband's concessions when they get married. But the patriarch of this family, he died, actually I think a few days after I had left. But all day he would sit in front of his house, and he would have his grandchildren playing a few feet away from him, and he would watch them, you know, and people would come in to ask his advice, and he would talk with them. And I think he would usually eat some of his daughter-in-law's cooking. He said he liked rice more than millet, so whoever was cooking rice, he would eat from whatever family was cooking rice. He would eat from their family that day. The life is slow-paced. It's certainly not as productive. It's African time, but everyone has time to unwind as a part of that self-determination. They can do kind of plot their own course in life to a certain extent, choose what they want to do. The children are around their parents. I think that's a major effect. They aren't off with strangers. John Taylor Gatto has talked a lot about public education. And I remember reading on Vox Day's blog, that's voxday.blogspot.com, that the biggest thing that statistically the suicide rate in the U.S. and in Europe skyrockets when the school season is in place, and drops when the school is out of session. So along with that, there's the biggest thing you could do to reduce child mortality here in the U.S. would be to end school, or public school at least, and have parents with their children. Well, the children here are with their parents all the time. It makes them happy. Their parents give them a lot of freedom. There's not the helicopter parent which predominates in America. When we took the donkey ride to Gubawa, the children just came off and gave us the donkey ride, and they stayed around and watched us in Gubawa, and they kind of came back on their own. Parents trust their children. Also, a few times when we were out in the bush walking around, we saw a few children just sort of going through the bush by themselves. I mean, the parents trust their children. We saw also we saw a horse, I think an ox cart returning back from market. It was driven by a single child who had to have been lifted up on that ox cart because he was too small to climb up there himself. He was driving this ox cart back alone. High quality food. I thought the food here was very good. They don't have very much spices. Pretty much their only spices are MSG, or a bouillon type thing, which is primarily composed of MSG and red pepper. But I had the best beans and rice that I have ever had in my life here in Lido. None of the children are put on Ritalin. There's few police. You're not always looking over your shoulder because you might be driving 1 mile an hour over the speed limit and get pulled over, or there's no police that you have to fear all the time. All right, so how should you help? One of the things you ask when you do this is, how exactly can you help the Nigerians? There's a problem with most foreign aids. One thing is, paying someone to help themselves is not a good idea, because someone should help themselves to help themselves. If you pay someone to do something and then you stop paying them, they tend to not do it anymore. So if you pay someone to help themselves and suddenly the funds stop coming, well then maybe they won't help each other themselves anymore. For instance, there was a tree growing initiative, and the Western company or government or whatever would pay people to plant trees. Now the reason they're want these trees to be planted is to stop desertification, to help these people's ground stay more fertile. So then eventually they stopped paying them money to do it, but they still gave them the trees for free. And then the people stopped planting trees. They say, why should I plant trees if no one's paying me to do it? Another thing, and it's, I think, probably a little bit too involved to describe here, is that there's African time. Things just work differently in Africa, in this region. I don't fully understand it myself, but things just work differently here, and so you can't even, it's really difficult to understand even being in America, so that's another thing. And going along with that, you have to understand the local situation before you can help it. There were some porta potties or outhouses that were built in Lido, and they were completely unused because half of them were still locked. They were built by a Dutch aid agency, and they were never cleaned, so they just stank really bad. And they were in the kind of the back area behind the market. I'm not sure, probably tens of thousands of dollars just pitched down the drain. What do Nigerians say they need help on? Well, one is agriculture, another is health, both human and animal. Finally, food and clothes, and then environmental restoration. So that's just some of the things that they had talked about. So, as you leave this presentation, if you want to remember just 5 things about Niger, here are some. 1, Nigerians are very happy. 2, there are children everywhere. They have the 7 and almost 8 children per woman, and there's just children everywhere. Niger is dusty. There's dust everywhere. Grass doesn't grow unless you specifically try to grow it. And then it's pretty windy, so the dust gets picked up. Also, don't think I mentioned this before, but you can easily start a riot by taking pictures. The children love to be photographed, and then they love to look at the picture on the little view screen of your camera. Be careful, though, because when you get your camera out, and then you can take a picture, and then you hold it down so that they can look at it, and you'll have all these children running and jumping all around you, and you'll have 30 or 40 children all crowding in to try to see this thing. So it can be... you can really get the children worked up doing that. And to find out more, my brother's website, thomaseleonard.blogspot.com, and also my website, funinniger.com. On the website, there's a link to my YouTube channel, which I have some videos that I took. Also, there's a link to a live.com photo gallery where you can see all sorts of pictures, far more than are in this. You can download this presentation and also see many different blog posts which I've written with my impressions of this trip. So thank you for watching this. You can forward it to a friend if you want. I gave this presentation at the International Center and thought that maybe other people might like to watch it. So thank you. And visit my website, funinniger.com.